Forward pressure is a 3-step, incrementally progressing Prasanna body flow, emphasizing the ability to yield, halt, and overcome force. Specifically, the eccentric, isometric, and concentric strength in the frontal plane with all 4 limbs in the trunk. I've named it the yang of yoga to emphasize the fact that this is a rebalancing in this style of yoga. The recent fixation on the yin aspect has derogated half of yoga. The yin aspect is basically the release of connective tissues and joints and the slow concentration of individual postures without movement. Whereas the yang aspect is the ability to generate muscular force through movement. In the old days, it wasn't very difficult to find a strong guru to lead. You'd never find a namby-pamby milquetoast guru. They were always tough sons of bitches who would wrestle. They'd swing heavy clubs just like Hanuman, the Indian god of strength. They'd climb ropes and stone pillars and perform extremely challenging gymnastics routines. Without the yang aspect of yoga, you isolate half of the potential people that have the opportunity to have access to yoga. It's very difficult for a lot of men in particular to watch the contortions of a 105-pound woman and see how that relates to their potential. There's no one aspect of yoga that's superior. And I don't want to give the impression that Prasanna body flow is yang only. There should be a yang and yin balancing, and that as you go deeper into your practice, you'll constantly flow throughout those aspects, not just at one time, yang or yin, but throughout your body, you will have different concentrations. The goal of yoga is not to find the way or to follow a particular way. It's to create your own yoga. And I hope that forward pressure and this rebalancing aspect of yang will give you that opportunity. The first of the 7 exercises is the quad ellipse. In the ellipse, your main goal is to be able to adopt this quad squat posture with a flat back. Your elbows should be pointed out at a 45-degree angle, and your knees should be pointed out at a 45-degree angle with your heels coming in. Keep your core concentrated and tight. Exhale and contract. This will give you the ability to be buoyant. The basic version will always begin on your knees, and there are 4 different variations to the ellipse that we'll concentrate on. In the first, the forward ellipse, you're coming forward, placing your solar plexus beyond your hands for the rotation. Obviously, backwards will come in the same motion in the opposite direction, but notice that you have to squat down in order to achieve it. You're trying to keep your toes tucked in underneath you, but if you can't, you can come down onto the top of your feet. The angular ellipse in the basic version runs from one knee to the opposite hand. So if you're moving from your knees, you're coming across, back to the knee, across, back to the knee. The other angle, across to the hand, then you slow down to your hand and hover across the mat to the knee again. Finally, the lateral. In the lateral ellipse, your goal is to really concentrate on getting the solar plexus between your hands. This basic version is deceptively difficult. Even though you're on your knees in the opposite direction, come down to one hand, float across the other hand, and press, and try and find the ellipse in it and not make it so staccato where you're moving in a square box. Back to the first ellipse, the variation of forward. In the second step, you come off of your knees. So now you're in this quad squat. And you're trying to rotate so that your back remains parallel to the ground. When you move the opposite direction, you accomplish the second step of the backwards ellipse. You're absorbing with your hips, projecting off the ball of foot. You want to exhale on the effort phase. In this case, it may be coming out of the box of your solar plexus. On the angle, once again, the second step of the angle will move from your knee to your hand, across to the opposite side. If you're moving from the opposite knee to the opposite hand. And then finally, the lateral. In the lateral, you'll find it a little challenging to float your hips, your lunar plexus, or your dantian, above your heels. You don't want to concentrate too much on your hands. You want to allow it to swim so your knees float in both directions. The third level of each ellipse brings you into a dog extension. So if you were to do the front ellipse, you want to come all the way up to try and get your knees locked so that you can place more mass coming forwards. Then you absorb in your hips and rock back. Opposite will be the backwards ellipse, step 3 of the backwards ellipse. To get full dog or downward dog extension. When you move angularly from knee to hand, you're still getting that full dog extension, but now it's coming, concentrating on one leg. Opposite leg, full dog extension in the ellipse. Lateral is a little more challenging because you want to absorb and extend those knees as you move across from one hand to the next for step 3 of the lateral ellipse. Downward dog press is the second exercise. Like every one, the first step of downward dog will begin on your knees. If you can, keep your ball of foot curled underneath. If not, go flat foot. The basic version is to come and try and get your solar plexus beyond your hands. As you do, let your feet tip upwards so that you can get more mass to concentrate on the movement. Try and keep your elbows together, not out. Keep your elbows close to your ribs for the first down dog press. In the second variation, you're coming up into that quad squat and pressing with your feet to bring more mass behind without placing your knees on the ground. The third variation, the final variation of the down dog press, begins in full downward dog, comes up onto your toes with knee lock. Get your head between your hands to press. Concentrate on slow, perfect form as you develop the full downward dog press. The third exercise, the upward dog press, like all of the exercises, begins on your knees. In the first version, you want to come skating close to the mat. Tuck your elbows down flat. As you do, hover your jaw across the mat. And only when your solar plexus rides between your hands do your elbows pick up and come up into upward dog variant. When you come down, place your elbows on the mat and hover backwards in the first variation of the upward dog press. Hover. Try and keep your body off of the mat. Only use your forearms. In the second variation, you're coming off your knees and extending so that you have to use more of your body to incorporate into the movement. And then finally, the third variation of the upward dog press, just like the downward dog press, begins in full downward dog, but comes down towards the ground, compressing into that quad squat. Elbows pinch in. You're hovering through on the mat to full upward dog. When you come back, lift your body off the ground, press backward through it. Keep your forearms flat on the mat. Hover when you come by. Compress, float, extend, hover back. Forearms down, and back up into downward dog for the final variation of the upward dog press. The fourth exercise is the swinging plank. Really want to concentrate on the breath through the movement. Just like we talk in Preparatore body flow, the minimum breath should be exhalation on the effort. In the beginning version, I want you to tuck both knees across, both knees tight together. Lean your sits bone down towards the mat, but you don't want to go all the way because you will be swinging through plank. Come to the near arm, wherever the knees are aligned, come to that hand as you come downward towards the mat. When you do, and you swing the plank to the opposite side, that's when you switch knees. That's when you perform the knee switch to the opposite side. Knees are tucked in, sits bone and hip down towards the mat. Near arm. Hover across between the hands, knee switch, and compress in the basic version. If you have to, you can put your body down on the mat. But I want you to try to work towards hovering and exhale through the motion. In the second variation, you're going to work on one knee. So you're going to lift the back knee. Same thing, but now in the second phase, you're working on suspending that swinging plank. So from here, knee switch in the air. One knee. Bring your body all the way back to your elbow pit. Exhale through it. Once your suspension is strong enough, then you can go on to the final variation and really need to exhale through it. So you compress, you extend, all the way through. Tuck those knees, ball of foot. Near arm, far arm, press. Near arm, far arm, press back. And then come back to your basic position to complete the final phase of the swinging plank. The fifth exercise, or the screwing press, begins on your knees. Now, the effort phase is difficult to see, so you need to have a tight tummy, work on contracting your core. And as you're going down, eccentrically slowing yourself down, you're still working on exhale. But you may need to exhale when you unscrew and press up. So actively concentrate on exhaling through the effort until it becomes easier, and then your breath will change. Then you will start to breathe more in flow. Exhalation on compression. Inhalation without thinking about it on expansion. But for now, exhalation on the effort phase. On your knees for the first phase of the screwing press. You want to extend the leg so you only have a margin of your body mass. Bring your elbow down and rotate your forearm. As you rotate your body back, screw your arm in the opposite direction. Contract your knee, extend your opposite leg, elbow down, screw your arm, unscrew it to press back, contract your knee, extend the opposite leg. The main emphasis here is minimizing how much body mass you have on until you develop the ability to project your arm rotationally, not just press. You should never have to do a push-up again. So the basic version, is with the leg extension. The second phase is to come off of your knees and extend. So your knees aren't on the ground. It will be more challenging because even though the mass is back on top of your legs, you will feel it arc into that press. So in the second phase, you'll be able to control it by how far your knees are off the ground, which brings to the next point of the third phase being from a full squat. So when you're in a downward dog position and you squat, you project forward, roll. Unscrewing your arm, press back into that squat, into full down. Across. Press all the way back, exhale, and extend. Compress your knees, come forward, and rotate onto that screwing arm for the final phase of the screwing press. The quad hop is one of the most masochistic gifts you could give yourself because of how much explosive power it generates and because of how much you have to concentrate on proper form. The better that you get at it, the easier it'll become and the more challenging you can make it. In the basic version, your knees will be off the ground, but now you're developing that buoyancy of combining the yang and the yin aspect, of combining muscularity and movement with the release of connective tissue and joints. So knees are out, and you're just working on absorbing with your elbows and your knees, absorbing with your hips and your shoulders. Your solar plexus should be projected between your hands. That spring, the quad spring, is your basic version so that you can get that generation of power and the synergy between the yielding, halting, and overcoming strength. The eccentric, isometric, and concentric strength. In the second version, you're going to allow that elasticity, like a rubber band, to release and project you off of the ground. Now I want you to concentrate on keeping your knees out. Exhale into the shock absorption, where you're coming into your mat. Exhale down so that you can absorb it. Keep your knees out so that you're not banging your knees into your mat. The final phase of the quad hop is to actually bring your hands and your feet together. That requires that you act like a tree frog. Your fingers will spread and separate, and each one of your finger pads will be absorbing into the ground. Same thing with your feet. So when you clap, you must absorb, so you need to get your hands back out into position so that you can fully absorb the entire motion. And that will complete your third phase of the quad. Your final seventh exercise is the crow hop. Now, you should really think of the crow hop as a progression leading up to and beyond the standard crow asana. If you begin in your quad position, quad squat, like we always work on, you're working on projecting that elasticity in your hips up to your arms. Now the goal here is to make sure that you're aiming to have soft tissue and soft tissue. Your knees beyond your upper arm. Your elbow is beyond your lower leg. And that will be your practice position to work up to the crow balance. So in the first version, you're just working from quad squat, hopping up into a crow prep. Quad squat, crow prep. This will be a challenging exercise in and of itself. And in the first version, you're not going to be working into crow, but there's a continuum. You can slowly start adding more mass into your grip, into your fingers, so that you find the right balance and gradually, incrementally strengthen your wrists. So in the second version, when you quad hop up to your crow position, your crow prep, you slowly start to add more mass. You're getting this slowly. You're not trying to leap into position so that your fingers suddenly have to compensate for any kind of weakness or strength deficit in your wrist. It's incremental. So from the second version, you hop up and you work to find out where the balance point is in your crow. It'll be different for each one of you. Quad hop, into crow, slowly. It's the third version, moving beyond the standard crow position that most people find challenging, because even experienced yogi and yogini only concentrate on the holding of the posture, not moving through and beyond it. In the final phase, in phase 3 of the hopping crow, you start with your quad hop, but you're going to go directly into crow. So from quad position, you're coming into your crow. It's going to take the same incremental development of working from quad to crow, and you just start to hem out that transitional movement of stopping with toes here, so that eventually you work from exhaling out of your quad squat into crow. The motion of coming out of crow is the challenging one. In crow position, to move through it, you want to bring your knees up. Exhale and contract your core and extend backwards. You're not just dropping back down. You're moving through and beyond crow. Quad, crow. Exhale and bring your knees back together. One more time. So that you move through that final phase of developing your crow hopping. compensation exercises address the fact that whenever you're training specifically. So in this particular flow, it's always forward pressure. It's always concentration between the hands and the feet and this strength. So there's specific chains of tension that we have to release at the end of our session. The first being, the first link in the chain is our wrist. So wrap your middle finger and thumb around your wrist, separate the joint slightly, and bring your wrist to your body. Don't try and press your hand to your elbow. Just slowly start to get the fluid back into the joint. You want to wash it with that lubrication because it's the only nutrition that our joints get after puberty is through movement. So open up the capsule a little, bring your wrist to your chin, and your hand will come to your elbow. After you become proficient with this one, you may want to add in the rotary aspect of an exercise I developed specifically to work the elbow to wrist. And that is, once you're holding the wrist down, let the elbow pit rotate up towards the sky. So it comes in, extends, and your elbow rotates upwards. This would be the full range of motion. You can do the opposite of bringing the elbow down and rotating this circle while holding the wrist. Since the muscles are multi-jointly attached over joints, working compensations through multiple joints really gives you the release from all of the force you've been generating in your flow practice. So this would be the first exercise, concentrating on your wrist. Working down closer to the torso, your next joint that you need to address is the elbow. We began to work on the elbow in the wrist compensation exercise. But now to get full elbow, we can start with a variant of the locust pose or locust asana, which is to place your elbow pit down on the mat and place your hip over top. You want your hip bone to slowly help fully extend your elbow. At first, this may hurt a lot. What you want to do is you want to keep the discomfort at a 3 or less on a scale of 1 to 10, and try and keep your palm flat on the mat. Your palm flat on the mat, and only your hip gently pressing into the back of your elbow to get full extension. It should open up in a couple weeks, fully. Once you're comfortable with that, you want to work so that both elbows come underneath. So both elbows are now underneath. Your chin is up on the mat, and your elbow pits are resting flat on the floor. This may take another week or so, and it may regress a little the more tension you develop. The volleyball position works into the next exercise of taking that pose and putting it in motion. The locust traveling, which I like to think of as tank tracks, are the shoulders rolling in unison. So once you're in the basic locust pose, your shoulders are rolling as you release the opposite hip to slide the hand down farther, and to retract and slide it back. This helps make a full connection from the elbow up into the shoulder. When you work from the elbows up into the shoulders, the compensation now is, since these are fixed in place and packed in tight, you want to roll all 4 shoulder joints in unison. You're lifting the shoulder up, rotating it forward, dropping it down in both directions. But you want that between the 2 shoulders because there's this bandolier of connective tissue diagonally slung across your torso. By working it, pumping it asymmetrically, you'll help break up any type of potential adhesions or fixation points. This is the basic exercise. You can take your arms out and extend your elbows. By locking out your elbows, you're lengthening the tissues, the multi-joint tissues, to get the full benefit, 100% of the health benefits of the exercise. And then once you've washed the joint with that nutritive flow, you can do the final exercise, which is to grab your wrist from behind and rotate your elbow pit out to the side. This is a mobility drill. Don't think of it as trying to stretch your shoulder. Roll your shoulder back and turn your torso slightly. Switch. This only acts as a cupping hand to rotate the shoulder for full compensation from your forward pressure. The second last exercise that you're going to work for compensation are your hips. For some people, this is more of an issue than others. So, take these compensation exercises and use them not as a dogma that you have to follow these, but wherever you happen to have sticking points in your practice, that's what you concentrate upon. The camel pose prep is to work from your hands and knees like you're working forward pressure, but move towards upward dog and bring your knees off of the ground and allow your hips to do a figure eight from one side to the next. This will help you. Once again, there are connective tissues swung across diagonally. It's not just linearly. That's why camel pose is insufficient. When you're doing camel prep, you want it to be mobile, so you're washing the joint with all of that nutritive flow from your synovial fluid. Extend the hips all the way down, get full range of motion, working through an upward dog variant. Small variations with that figure eight with the pelvis. Then you can bring your knees underneath you and start working on camel. I don't prefer to work on camel from just a kneeling position standing and then working forward. I want to work the whole joint so that when you work from seated, you're pressing your hips upwards. Work through the full range of motion. And then lastly, you can let your neck come back. The goal here is to concentrate on your pelvis. So once you have a median range, you can work your figure eights in a camel variant. Don't go to your maximal range when you're working mobility drills because you may push too far. You want to go about half the range of a standard exercise, a standard asana, before adding mobility. The final exercise, and probably most important, is your neck. And the reason that your neck needs compensating for is because when you're in forward pressure, your musculature is trying to hold your neck up. So it's shortening the muscles on your posterior chain, holding this tight. So it's important to have those tissues relax so that it doesn't become fixated in place. So the first exercise is to work on just a frontal slide into a lateral slide. A lateral slide may be very difficult for you at first. Concentrate just on frontal slide and then slightly dipping back and forth. This will lead you to your first basic circle compensating. You'll feel it from your forehead all the way back to probably mid-back where the tissues connect and are slung over top of your head in the rear back line. But it's important to begin with this mobility drill before you work on the range of motion of tucking your chin, letting your head fall back, and then rotating. Dip your chest and let your chin come back into place. And don't pull your chin back because that actually works against the compensation. Chin tucks in, lift, and then you're going to slightly shake your head yes or shake your head no. Dip your chest and bring your head back. This is a really important drill. Especially for people who have had any type of herniated disc in their neck. This is an excellent drill that is often prescribed by chiropractors that have experience with the Kenzie technique of working to help massage the disc back into place without exacerbating the inflammation. The final attachment to the ground is our feet, and since we've had such a fixed concentration on our feet, I like to work to wash the foot bones and the ankle bone so that all of the joints are lubricated and receive sufficient nutrition after all that compression. So the first exercise is just to, while kneeling, start to bring your knees off of the ground so that it's really extending that concentration on your ankles, and just move it back and forth to get a feel for it. Once you do, then you can bring it up to a standing position, kneeling position, and work on the foot roll. The knee comes down and you're rolling over. This will help wash the entire joint. The opposite direction helps really target the toes, where you're rolling over to the side, curling your toes underneath, and getting what looks like a balletic foot if you're wearing a toe shoe. But it's that full range of motion that helps open up and heal the ankle of any kind of chronic tension you might develop had you not done the compensation.